the DJs are a few accomplishments that Howard H.K. Kessler hasn't already achieved. Whether they're in clubs, in the studio, radio, record labels, he's done it all. And before his currently syndicated Top 40 mix show, In the Mix with HK, caught fire and went to #1 in a variety of radio markets, HK enjoyed a career that most DJs would envy. In addition to years of club gigs, rocking the dance floor, and studio work, producing and remixing music, Howard spent significant time at the legendary Tommy Boy label. As director of A&R and staff producer, he created MTV Party to Go, the biggest selling dance compilation series in music history. In fact, 2021 marks 30 years since he and Tommy Boy launched the first of its 6 best-selling volumes. Additionally, at Tommy Boy, HK oversaw the recording careers of a few hit-making acts you might have heard of: Queen Latifah, Naughty by Nature, De La Soul, a personal favorite of mine, House of Pain, Coolio, Digital Underground, RuPaul, and the criminally underrated Information Society.
Very underrated.
HK worked 5 Grammy Award nominated projects, over 50 gold and platinum records, and is a Grammy nominee himself. And on the radio front, Howard was part of the original music programming team that launched WKTU, the renowned and groundbreaking dance music radio station in New York City. So please give a big DJ X welcome to Howard H.K. Kessler.
All right, that was great. Let's just go right now.
Let's do it. So for many of you guys and gals who've been coming to DJ Expo over the years, we like to bring OGs of all sorts. And Howard has really kind of done it all. It kind of hit me all in a moment where I said, why don't we just get him? We can talk about anything. And he's got some great stories, and I think you're going to really enjoy them. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up, and where did your love of music start? Was it one song? Was it an artist?
Well, first I'm a Jersey boy, born and raised, so grew up here in the Jersey area, northern Jersey, right outside New York City. And it wasn't a particular song or artist. I'd have to credit my love of music from my dad. That's where I got it. Who sadly is no longer with us. But and my dad wasn't a musician. He wasn't in the music business.
He just had records.
He was just a guy, who loved records. And I remember as a little kid, even in my single digits, every Sunday we used to go to the Harmony Hut on Route 22 in Springfield. He would go and buy records, and I would kind of tag along with him. And I just remember thumbing through the bins and listening to what he was listening to, and it all started there. And then I started buying my own records.
Well, tell us what he was listening to. What do you remember him playing?
Everything from Frank Sinatra and Shirley Bassey and Barbra Streisand to The Fifth Dimension, Earth, Wind and Fire, Led Zeppelin. It really ran the gamut. My dad had a really nice, diverse palette, so it exposed me to a lot of stuff. I even remember every time we were in the car, the radio was blasting, his wedding band was tapping on the steering wheel, so I felt like I was always surrounded with it, and I just absorbed it from him.
And before we get deeper into radio and modern radio, what a lot of, I guess, younger folks don't quite realize is pop radio in the 1960s and the 1970s was so incredibly diverse. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, so there was country radio, there was pop radio, there was what they called soul music at the time. We didn't even have a rock radio station, but we had the one station where it was a pop station where you could flip it on, you would hear a Willie Nelson song next to an Earth, Wind and Fire song, next to a Foghat song, next to the cheesiest bubblegum song, Run Joey Run or something.
Right.
And but the thing was, it made your ears a little larger and a little more acceptable of a lot of different types of music. I guess that impacted you.
Yeah, it absolutely did. The cool modern day version of that is, I think, what Spotify and YouTube and TikTok has done. Now younger kids are exposed to lots of stuff the way we were when pop radio was great back in the day. Now pop radio plays, the same 15 songs every hour. But that, to me, it got stale for a while, but now we have the new digital version of what great pop radio is. In other words, where listeners can be exposed to lots of stuff and kind of gravitate to what they want, what they like.
Right, and ease of access is easier than ever. So let's get back into your path a little bit through music. Did you start DJing first, or did you start working within the industry?
I started DJing. Actually, I started taking apart all of my parents' TVs and stereos in the house when they would go away on vacation. Yeah, I was that nerdy geek, and not only was I loving music, but for me it was like, how did that go from when I put the needle on the record? How did the sound go to the speaker? So, my parents would go away on vacation, leave me with my older sister, and literally they weren't even at the airport, and I was taking shit apart. So it started with that. And then I started a love of gear with the music and this idea of, engineering.
And what year are we talking about?
A while ago.
Folks. So the gear was rather...
I mean, come on, we just talked about it's the 30th anniversary of my first MTV party to go. A while ago. So we're talking probably, this is like the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the pop music, disco era, hard rock was out there, everything. So how did you sort of get into the DJing side of it? And where did that career begin?
It's a great question, and for me, it was an easy transition. My love of music, the fact that I had the biggest record collection on the block, and I was a geekhead, a total gearhead. I mean, I still am to this day, constantly getting gear. So, when you're the kid on the block that has the biggest record collection and the gear to play it on, you start doing house parties. I was in junior high school and I was like, hey, you want me to spin your bar mitzvah? You want me to spin your sweet 16? So I didn't know how to do a mix yet. I hadn't taught myself how to beat mix, and I hadn't graduated to that level. It was all about curation and just picking the right music and feeling the room and just, trying to make a really tight segue, it wasn't beat mixing or all the things I could do now or I came on to do, but it was just the right music and having gear to play it on and knowing how to rock a party.
So you were playing house parties and some mobiles. Did you graduate to clubs eventually?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I graduated from that to I ended up becoming co-owner of Garden State Record Promotions, which was for many, many years the largest record pool in New Jersey in the 80s. And so I was in the record pool world. I was DJing in clubs before I was even really of legal age to do it. And so was in many, many clubs. I mean, I had a residency at Charlie's West, a very well-known club in East Orange, New Jersey. And I was booking Madonna when her first single came out.
So we're talking 82, 83.
Yeah.
So a lot of the DJs, or a lot of the people who got into the record industry, especially on the promo side, were DJs to begin with. When I first started at DJ Times, every promo guy who worked for a record label was a former DJ at some big club in some city. So was that your path as well?
Yeah. This love of music continued to develop, and I kept pursuing more and more production and studio work. But my very, very first record company gig, kind of a fun story, but I'll try to make it short. I had just graduated college, and I had this idea for a dance label, an indie dance label. I wanted to start it, but all I had was my ears. I knew the whole club culture really well. I was spinning in the clubs. I was spinning in the clubs all through college. I came back to New Jersey, and I wanted to start an independent label. And through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, I got introduced to Peter Pan Records. Now, for those of you, I don't even know if it exists anymore, and you're probably all too young to remember, but Peter Pan was kind of like a Disney. They were very, very well known for children's records and stories, and they actually put out that Djing, I think that Djing distributed that Djing Fund and exercise videotape.
Which did very well.
Yeah. Which made $1 gazillion. And I got an introduction to the owner of that company, and I went to him and I pitched the idea. First I had to explain how the whole 12-inch club world worked, and the whole underground scene and record pools, and I was like, look, you can just press up 10,000 units. We can make the record very cheaply. You press 10,000 units, you can break even, you can make a little profit. I said, and if you have a big hit, you sell 50,000 units, 100,000 units, you can seriously make some serious dough. And you don't have to worry about buying radio or getting on radio or anything.
Promote to the club.
Just promote the clubs on the street. He loved the idea. It was this whole new world that I brought to him. So I formed Connection Records, and I was doing all the national promotion with the radio mix show guys, with all the record pools, and that was my first official record company gig. Yeah.
And how did that progress to the time that I guess you met Tom Silverman?
Yeah, I was, I was total type A personality, so I was running Connection. Yeah, I was running Connection Records, I was running the record pool, I was spinning in the clubs, and then I started to really go do a deep dive into the studio world. And this is how I met Tom Silverman. So I was running a studio, I was general manager for a studio called Eastern Artists Recording Studios, little one-room studio in New Jersey. Many, many famous records came from there. Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, the Isley Brothers, Third World, Try Jah Love, many, New Order, Blue Monday came from this little room next to a railroad track in New Jersey. And I rebuilt it, took over the studio, was the general manager there. And then Tom Silverman contacted me.
Who was the founder of Tommy Boy Records?
I was like New Music Seminar, Dance Music Report. Yeah. For guys like us, he was like the guy.
Real entrepreneur.
Yeah, very, very entrepreneurial, OG music guy. And so he contacted me and said he was looking to build a huge 6-room studio, 10,000 square foot place in New York City. Would I come talk to him? Because East Stars Recording Studio was very well known. So I met with Tom. We literally, we just were attached at the hip for many, many months. I was putting together all the policies and procedures and things, that need to happen at a studio. I acted as the general contractor overseeing the studio being built in New York City at 632 Broadway between Houston and Bleecker. It was in a great neighborhood called Sanctuary Recording. After we had it, we ended up, space got sold to Philip Glass, the famous composer now. It's Looking Glass Studios. So that's how Tom and I met. Yeah.
So Tom also gets a lot of credit for being one of the first record company guys to really believe in hip hop.
Right.
And again, a lot of folks may not remember this, but I remember in the 80s, black radio wouldn't even play hip hop at a certain point. There was this divide between the old school R&B and what they considered not music. Things that was...
And to make matters worse, to mucky up the water even more, that was when Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, was starting the whole parental advisory movement.
PRMC, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what Tom Silverman did was he was the guy who signed these just world-shattering records at the time. I mean, I don't know if you remember what Africa Bambaataa sounded like the first time you heard it, but your jaw sort of just dropped.
Right.
Like, what is this?
First thing you thought, wait, is this Kraftwerk? No, it's not Kraftwerk. Somebody's rapping on it.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah. So Tom, really a genuine visionary, and put his money where his mouth is and signed an incredible, diverse roster of talent. Talk a little bit about the acquisition of talent, scouting the talent. Were you looking for long-term artists, or were you just looking for that hot record?
Look at both. And, you always, when you're running a record company or when you're an A&R executive, you want to sign someone who's got legs, because usually you're going to spend a lot of money, on that first or second hit, and you may not recoup. I know that goes counter to what I said, but I was referring to club records. 12-inch records that you were just making for the clubs. You weren't trying to get airplay, you weren't trying to go gold or platinum. That's a very different world, just having a little club hit. But the kind of records we were doing, when you're going gold and platinum and selling millions and millions of records that get Grammy nominations on everything you're putting out, it's a whole other world, and it costs a lot to feed that machine. So you're going after artists that you think have legs, but if something happens to come in,
a new sound.
And a new sound comes in and you hear it and you think, God, this could be a one-hit wonder, but holy shit, we've got to put this thing out. Right. So it really could be either or.
Yeah, and some of the records sold more than the others. I mean, I don't think De La Soul sold as much as Naughty by Nature, but De La Soul to me is like one of the just incredible hip-hop groups from the 80s. They were one of the first ones to just throw the kitchen sink at everything, every kind of sample. You cannot make that first record now. It would cost you too much money in sampling fees to do that. But so talk about
that was the early days of sampling, where it it wasn't even called sampling.
Right.
You know, and the legal department, wasn't really, having any headaches until someone came after it. Funny story about sampling, I'll digress for just a second. That Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force record that has the Kraftwerk riff, that was that was a very valuable lesson to Tom Silverman, the founder of Tommy Boy, because after it was a huge hit and went gold, Kraftwerk came after Tommy Boy. And that was $1 million lawsuit.
And it's always after it's a hit.
Right. And it's actually, if you're the person who was sampled, the best thing you can do is wait. Don't make a move first. Because once it's a hit, you're over the barrel. So you could get a lot more money in a lawsuit if your music's been used and it's a hit. If you find out about it when it first comes out and it hasn't done anything yet, you're gonna have to settle for something a lot less. If it goes on to be a big hit, you lost out. So that was a valuable lesson for Tommy Boy and Tom Silverman, because that was over $1 million that Tommy Boy had to pay out once Soul Sonic Force hit big with that record.
Right, and to go back to the sampling era a little bit, when you listen to records like Paul's Boutique, or the first two De La Soul records, really, from what I understand, what they were doing a lot of was paying flat fees to some of these artists, like the Whistle in The Wizard by Black Sabbath. I think they paid like 50 grand or something for that, for a record that sold I don't know how many million. So it was a good business venture until the rest of the music industry figured out, wait a minute.
Yeah, it's funny, I was kind of responsible for the business department, our lawyers, clear the samples. But one of the things I did as an A&R director there was a lot of things beyond, looking for the next hit record and being in the studio, and that's all the fun stuff, the fun, sexy stuff. But one of the things I did was I was very conscientious of sampling and where it was going to go. Where it was
about to get very expensive.
It was going to get very expensive. So I created these sample clearance sheets. And I had all of our producers and artists, when they would go into the studio, fill them out. And it was the name of the song, who the artist was. It was a template for them. They just had to fill in the box. Who the publisher was, or multiple publishers, the frequency, and that meant, the use of the sample, how often it was used in the song. So we would go to the publishers and we would clear this stuff before we ever even released the record, which gave us the opportunity to negotiate very favorable terms, because we were being above board. We were the first people in the business to be above board about it. And the record wasn't even released, so no one knew if it was going to be a hit. So here we are offering them money for a record that's 100 years old. They're not making any money from it. So yeah, great. Sure. So it proved to be very fortuitous and a smart thing to do. Yeah.
Right, and over time, a lot of people adopted the very same approach. If you remember a record by Fatboy Slim called The Rockefeller Stank, it's sort of a surf guitar thing with a big breakbeat. Well, that was originally the Satisfaction Stank, which is a Rolling Stones song you might have heard. They did not get the clearance for that one, so it became the Rockefeller Stank, and we're all better for it, I think.
Right.
It worked out. So let's talk a little bit about some of the artists you work with, because I'll mention them again: Queen Latifah, Naughty by Nature, De La Soul, House of Pain, Coolio, Digital Underground, RuPaul, and Information Society. Give me a couple stories on maybe some of your favorite artists and why you like working with them.
It's funny, I was in my hotel room before coming down here, and I was thinking, God, looking back, I have to start writing these down, before I get too old and I can't remember them, because there's so many good stories. First of all, I was blessed to be able to work with these artists, to be in the studio with these artists, and one of my favorite ones is Dana, Queen Latifah, and I had hired Soul Shock and Cutfather, who were two Danish hip-hop producers. I put the word out, whenever we have an artist going to the studio, make a record, and then I would, go through and listen to all this stuff along with our whole A&R committee. And Soul Shock and Cutfather from Denmark had sent me some beats, some multiple tracks, and there were several that I liked, and they got hired to produce some tracks. So I'm in the studio with Soul Shock and Cutfather, our engineer Shane, and Dana, Queen Latifah. And we're not recording yet, they're pulling up the tracks, and they're getting that ready, and Latifah is just warming up her voice. She's just doing some warming up exercises. And I hear, and she's singing, she's not rapping, and I hear her singing, and And I go, wait, let me hear that again. I go, Danny, you can sing. And I remember prior to this, she had never sung on record. So, and we're about to record the song Fly Girl, for those of you who remember it. So now I say, okay, instead of rapping the chorus, let me hear you sing that. Now, this is where the lines get blurred. Am I being an A&R guy, or am I the producer now at this point? So, it was just such a fun time, such a fun era, because I got to do so much. So we did a tape with her singing it at my behest, and her rapping it. We ended up putting out the version with her singing the chorus on that song. And from that day on, she also became a singer.
And she can act a little bit too.
She can act a little bit too.
Yeah. But it must be sort of amazing to be around talents like that. What's it like when how do you discover somebody like a Dana Owens, Queen Latifah?
It was so different then. Not to disrespect, A&R guys who are in the business now, but I think you guys have it so much easier now. I mean, back then there was no YouTube, there was no TikTok, there was no Shriller, there was no email, there was no friggin' internet. I mean, you had to, if you were an A&R guy, you had to hang out in the clubs, you had to network your ass off. I had stuff coming in from producers and beat makers and recording engineers and studio owners and lawyers and agents. And you listened and you went through a million demo cassette tapes. Now you just flip on YouTube and there's so much talent out there. It's coming to you, it's flooded to you. So back then it was, you really had to grind it out. You had to be very passionate about it. You had to love it because you would spend hours and hours and hours trying to find that gem.
Right. So, from all of these acts that you signed or brought into the label, was there a proudest moment in terms of a record or a project? Something that you look back on that really makes you smile?
There's an interesting thing that happens when you work at a record label and a record is first released, and you can tell, is it going to be a slow go? Is it going to get legs? Are we going to have to work this? Is it going to fizzle out? Or is it going to be a hit? Because what happens is there's an electricity in the building. It's just, I'm actually getting chills, and I'm really covered in goosebumps right now. It's one of the things I love about the business, and it still to this day gives me goosebumps. So, naughty by nature, when we dropped OPP, when we dropped Hip Hop Parade, when we dropped the Humpty Dance, Digital Underground, those were moments when, I swear, the record wasn't out like 72 hours, and the phone lines are lighting up, okay? Radio wants to do interviews, David Letterman wants to book them, Jay Leno wants, whatever, and you're just like, oh yeah, buckle up, this is gonna be a ride.
and OPP must have been easy, because I remember the first time I heard it, and I was like, that's the Jackson 5. And then a couple weeks later, everybody in New York City is walking around with hats that said, down with OPP.
Oh my God, okay, so, great story. So, Tretch and Tupac, God rest his soul, because Tupac was also on Tommy Boy Fi and Digital Underground. Remember, Tupac's very first start, his very first lead step out vocal was on Same Song, when he was part of the Digital Underground posse. So that's how they got to meet, because they were part of our Tommy Boy family. And I love this story. You talk about the hats and the t-shirts. That was the other thing. That's how we knew it was going to blow up, because the street just knows. And literally overnight, there was OPP, bootleg OPP t-shirts and hats. And I'll never forget a studio session one day. Tupac was hanging out with Tretch. He was in New York. And Tretch shows up with Pac. Tretch was fired up. And back in the day, Tretch was mellowed. I've hung out with Tretch in more recent years. But Tretch has mellowed. Time's been good to him. But back then, he was down and raw and dirty. He let you know how he was feeling. And I'll never forget, man, he came in and he was like, these motherfuckers are bootlegging our stuff. And he was so pissed off. He's like, come on, Pac, come on, we're going down there. And all he wanted to do, he grabbed Pac and Tretch just wanted to go and kick some ass. He wanted to go find everybody on every street corner in New York who was bootlegging OPP. And I'm like, Tretch, calm down, Tretch. I said, this is so good, this is marketing. I said, you might lose me some change, but don't worry, you're going to be very wealthy with this song. You're going to make it up. But right now, this is the best street promotion you can have. Just let it go, let it go. One of my fond moments of trying to calm Tretch down.
and that project definitely worked. So on the other side of it, was there an artist that you felt like really just should have been bigger?
Yes. I signed a group called the House Jacks, which was an a cappella group, and I'm sure you never heard of them, because I not only signed them, but I also was producing several songs on the album, and they were an a cappella group, and we were recording the whole album. All the music on it was going to be true beatboxing, no instruments, no electronic drum machines, because these guys were just that good. And I was in San Francisco recording them. I thought this thing was going to be huge. I just couldn't really get everybody on board. We finished the album kind of got shelved, it never ever got released. To this day, it breaks my heart because I thought they were so talented, but there is a silver lining to that story. So the album never was released, people never found out who the House Jacks was, and that breaks my heart. But I am a believer that the cream does always rise to the top, sometimes it just takes time. And here's the silver lining to this story. Sharon, who was the founder of the House Jacks and the brainchild behind it, went on to become, to this day, he's known as the godfather of contemporary a cappella. He formed the A Cappella Society. He created the shows Sing Off, which is like an American Idol. It's his show. It's in like 150 countries, and I'm sure you all know his work. Unless you're a total credit geek like me and you stay in the movie theater and watch every credit at the end, my boy Deke is the producer, the arranger, and the vocal coach for all the music you hear in every single Pitch Perfect movie. So
things worked out.
So things worked out for him. The album on Tommy Boy didn't work out for him, but I'm glad his talent got a chance to be in the spotlight.
And another item on Tommy Boy. One of the things, again, I'm in college in the 80s in Athens, Georgia, and I moved to New York in 1990. So the thing that always impressed me about Tommy Boy was just how diverse it was. You could have a Coolio record, and you could have the Information Society, which was, they were from Minneapolis, right?
Yeah, yes.
They were sort of like New Order-ish, but maybe,
yes.
I mean, I'm not sure how you would describe it, but I thought they should have been like really big.
Yeah.
Maybe they were a little ahead of their time.
Love those guys. They were so good. I mean, they were definitely pioneers in electronic music. Also, we signed 808 State, who are really big in the UK, and we brought them to America. Yeah, another great electronic group that, didn't, and LFO. We also distributed LFO on Tommy Boy. So Tommy Boy was doing all this hip hop stuff, and yet we were really ahead of the electronic curve as well.
Right. The whole rave thing was exploding in England in 87, 88.
Yeah.
And I remember going to New Music Seminar in like 1990, and who are these people? And again, blew my mind with new music, and Tommy Boy was right in the middle of it. Let's talk a little bit about what Tommy Boy expected from you, what Tom Silverman expected from you. Hit records, of course.
Right.
But what was that relationship like?
Tom is a boss's dream. And I say that, I love that guy because no matter who he hired, whether you were in radio promotion or street promotion or club promotion or in A&R, Tom hired you and got out of your way. Like he hired you and that was the last day you saw him.
As long as you performed.
Unless you're in a promo meeting or a marketing meeting, and he came in. But he believed in you and what you could do, and he would get out of the way. He gave you the freedom to deliver. And out of my whole career, he's the one guy who I would say, that's the best way I could describe him, is he found people to do a job, and he literally just stepped aside and he let you do it.
And Tommy Boy also is very well known for the compilations. I can't tell you how many Tommy Boy compilations I have, a gazillion of them. Talk a little bit about the MTV Party to Go, the idea behind that, and why. I mean, it seemed like it's such a natural, obvious idea, but somebody has to do it.
Right. Okay, so this is interesting about Party Go, because first, the compilation prior to the MTV Party to Go series, the entire history of the compilation business and the record industry, was putting out retreads. labels would put out compilations, and when I mean by retreads, I mean it was older music that had already existed, and the compilation bin would kind of be in the back of the record store, you know, and it was just a way to generate publishing revenue and label revenue, but it was going back and revisiting music that had been around for years and wasn't selling anymore. With Party to Go, Tom was talking to Tom Freston, who was the then chairman of the MTV networks. And Tom was thinking about, you know, we should do a compilation that we can brand with the MTV logo. And then Tom called me in and told me he was, you know, looking to do this and wanted me to, you know, pick it up and run with it. And I said, let's make it remixes and let's mix it all together, DJ style. I said, which has never been done before. I said, yeah, there's been mixtape. Obviously, there's like mixtapes on the streets of New York all the time. I said, but let's make a big commercial album. It would be the hits that you're hearing on the radio while you're hearing them, not while they're old, but while they're in heavy rotation, except it'll be all remixes of them and we'll mix them together. And I had to fight for that because the legal department caught wind of that, and our head of business affairs came to Tom and I and said, no, you can't do remixes, it's going to be a nightmare to clear, and, you know, it's got to be the radio versions. And I really had to fight for that, and that was kind of, so then it was looking for the songs, clearing the songs, finding remixes, and then it became a technical nightmare for me, how I was going to produce and mix it, because I couldn't use records, because I didn't want to hear ticks and pops, and, you know, if this was going to be a big commercial release, so how do I do this? Well, this was the very beginning of recordable CD technology. So I got the record labels after I picked the versions I wanted. I got the labels to give me their digital masters. And I went into a studio. It was all these stages. First I had to curate the albums, decide what songs I wanted, what versions I wanted. Then I got all the digital masters from the labels. And then I went in and I convinced Techniques to give me, they were developing the Techniques what went on to become the SLP 1200s. They were like the first DJ CD player, like the first CDJ. They were beasts. They were so big and heavy. Oh my God, these were like 100 pounds each. Now you couldn't ride the platter. There was you know the pitch control. But remember, if you pitched it, you would hear the pitch. So, and there was no way to ride it. But what I did is, for me, it was all about being pristine and making it sound like a studio recording. So I transferred all of the digital masters on all the songs and the versions I wanted. And I made CD refs over at the Hit Factory with my mastering engineers who I worked with often. And I made a ref of each individual song. And then I put them in those prototypes of the Techniques SLPs, and I played them back with my DJ mixer at the time, which I brought into the studio, which was a GLI PMX 9000 mixer. Yeah, and I was mixing live in the mastering studio. Now, I can mix way better than those sounds. You know, I mean, there was so much more I wanted to do, but the idea was just to kind of have it be beat to beat. But since you couldn't get your hand on it and ride it, I had to try and get in and out as quick as possible. But that was how I did it. It was this very long, arduous process, but it accomplished what I wanted. You know, it was beat mixed, it was remixes, and it was clean as a whistle.
And it caught on.
Yeah, you can say that.
Pretty well.
So every one of them was gold and platinum.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I want to get into some of the things that Howard's doing now. But so talk a little bit about. I mean, obviously the record game changed dramatically, and you transitioned into radio. Tell us about that.
I was in radio before I was at Tommy Boy, and then I was, you know, a record label executive and doing and doing the label thing and producing and mixing and remixing, and then I got back into radio again when I started this show. Yeah, so but I've always my whole life has been on the radio or record side. And I'm sorry, you want to hear about in the mix with HK, how that came about?
Yeah. How you transition to that?
Okay, so we just celebrated, this summer we're celebrating our 10th anniversary of my syndicated mix show in the mix with HK, which is all over the country. And that was just me waking up one morning. Fortunately, my wife, who's known me my entire life since college, If this was earlier in our marriage, she probably would have told me I was crazy, but we've been together so long that when I came up with this idea, she said, yeah, honey, go ahead, you do it, which was great. So I had her support. I woke up one morning, I turned to her and I said, you know what, I've done the record label thing, I've done the radio thing, and I do the producing thing all the time, but I really would like to come up with something that would enable me to do all of my passions at the same time.
And be in charge of everything.
And be in charge of it. You got it, right, exactly. So I said to her, I want to create a new mix show. And I said, we're going to own it, we're going to produce it, I'm going to host it, I'm going to do all the production in it. It's going to be all my exclusive remixes, I'm going to mix the show together. I said, we're going to have all the pop stars and do celebrity interviews. I said, my production company is going to do all the syndication to all the affiliates around the country. I said, it's going to be our baby, we're going to control it, I don't care if it makes money. But and the reason why I say it has all my passions is because when you have a syndicated radio show, I was also a radio guy, so I love talking to the program directors who are on radio all around the country and being part of that network. And of course, we deal with the record labels because they're coming to us with all their new music, and we're interviewing all of the big pop stars who are the artists, and we know artist management. So it's really all the things I love to do. We're dealing with artists, artist management, labels, everybody. So I said, well, we'll just try to do it, we'll see what happens. It may last 6 months, it may last a year, and here we are 10 years later, and in every single market we air, we are #1 in our time slot in every single market in the ratings.
Yeah. So the mix shows obviously have changed and evolved over the years. What do you think makes a great modern radio mix show?
Here's where owning it was the right choice, and I didn't do that out of ego. I should have preferenced why that came about. So when I first had the idea, I went and shared the idea, with all the big companies, iHeart, Cumulus, Westwood One, Premier Radio Networks, all the big companies that were involved in syndication. And they all said they loved the demo, they loved the idea, they loved my backstory, and they were like, yeah, we want to do this. Go get 50 stations on your own, and then we'll partner up with you. To which the natural response from me, right, the entrepreneur in me was like, okay, so I'm gonna spend all this money, I'm gonna do all this work, and then you're gonna stick your hand in my pocket? If I could get 50 affiliates without you, what do I need you for? I wanted you to go out and get the affiliates. The stations can sign on.
It's like the artist who builds their own audience, and then all of a sudden Columbia Records sweeps in and says, okay, you've done all the work, sign here.
Right. Which is sadly very common in the entertainment business. Right. So it was kind of by default. I just was so irritated with that, that arrogant attitude. You love it, you want to do it, but you want me to do all the sweat and heartache, and then you want to take half the money. So I just decided to go it alone. Yeah.
And again, another hustle that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it's all about the grind, Jim. It's all about the grind.
You're telling me.
I'm not speaking much.
I get it. Let's talk a little bit about what a DJ brings to the record business, to just the mix show, just the idea that you have to listen to so much music all the time and curate music. What is your process? You do your own remixes and so forth, but how do you decide what you want to put on there?
And that also dovetails nicely into your previous question, which I'm not sure I answered. I apologize. How they've changed, how the mix shows have changed. If you're doing a mix show, on a big top 40 station that's owned by iHeart, the program director is really going to dictate what has to be in it. You might be an outside mixer who's lucky enough to get that gig, but you're working for the station. So the real perk for me is owning it and producing it and hosting it, and my production company syndicating it. In our contracts, when our affiliate stations around the country buy our show, it clearly states in the contract they cannot change it, they cannot alter it. They're buying our show because they like it. And that's what happens. They get our show, they grab it from our satellite, and it's beamed to their station, and the show's fully produced and done, and they can't do anything to it, other than insert the commercials into it. So we have that advantage where I can play what I want to play.
Right.
And yes, I'm taking all the big hits. I'm no fool. We're on top 40 radio, mainstream top 40 radio. So I know I've got to make my clients happy. So I'm playing the hits, but I also feature lots of new music. And when you hear the hits, you're hearing them in a way that you've never heard them before.
Right, and as for the content, you're doing some remixes. I'm assuming you're working with some remix services, record pools. Some...
Oh yeah. I'm in like 20 different record pools, so I spend 1,000 hours a month going through music. That's what people don't realize. To this day, it's funny. 10 years with this show, and my own friends and family, they're always like, it's only a 2-hour weekly syndicated show. I don't understand. How could you spend 80 hours on the show?
That's only 2 hours a year.
Yeah, right. That's the 2 hours you hear with the finished product. But we're doing interviews with artists, and I have a 45-minute interview, with Billie Eilish. I got to cut that down to a 3-minute segment. I got to go in the studio and cut that down. That's a lot of time. Not to mention hours and hours and hours of listening to music. I mean, I literally get service with no less than 1,000 new tracks every month. And I am listening to everything that comes in. So if you really believe in something and you're passionate about it, there's so much back work that you have to do before people can even hear that 2-hour finished product.
So let me ask you a little bit about just the general DJ culture and how it is. I don't know, it just seems bigger than ever. I mean, when we started DJ Times, when Vinny Testa started DJ Times in 1988, we were sort of renegades a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas now, everybody from that generation has kind of moved into the larger radio world, record world. DJs are everywhere now. Talk a little bit about the influence of the DJ in all the music that everybody hears now.
Well, first of all, it's so cool, and I'm so glad it's turned into what it is, because I kind of think DJs were underappreciated.
Oh, for sure.
Back in the 70s and 80s, in the early 90s, the DJs in the clubs, I mean, they were making so much money for these big clubs. I mean, there were so many...
And big labels.
Yeah, and big labels. And the DJs were at the core of it, And back then, DJs just wanted free records. If you could get a gig at a big New York club or LA club, I'll do it for $100. And back then, it wasn't a 1-hour set. I mean, you were spinning from, 10 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning.
But you'd get overwhelmed with free vinyl.
And you'd get free vinyl, and you were like, this is the bomb. I really all this free vinyl I'm getting from the record companies. And the record companies would occasionally wine you and dine you, because you helped break a record, or maybe you were lucky enough to get a gold plaque, with your name on it. But it was just all about the love of the music. And I'm so happy that the DJ industry has matured into the business that it is, whether it be doing mobile events and live production, whether it's spinning in clubs, whether you're a DJ / artist producer, remixer. I mean, we are a for real industry across the board. I mean, DJ culture in the early 2000s, I think finally grew up and it became the big business industry that it is. Yeah.
And before I open it up to the floor with some questions, I want to ask Howard, with things changing so quickly now, Spotify, Beat Source, there's all these incredible things that are happening really, really quickly. The game has changed. So what advice would you give a DJ now who wants to move up in the industry in any capacity?
First, all the old things that you've heard forever, and you hear them forever because they really do make sense. When we're young and foolish, we think, oh yeah, that's no big deal. But, it's the grind. You've got to respect the grind. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. You've got to be a hard worker. If you want to establish your DJ brand or your DJ company, you need to be, and I'm going to answer this for different levels because it's kind of different, and it's all about the grind no matter what level you're in, but my answer would skew a little different depending on, do you want to be a live mobile DJ, do you want to be a club DJ, do you want to be a DJ / artist, producer, remixer, and then it skews in different directions. First and foremost, no matter which way you want to go, you've got to put the time in. You've got to perfect your skill, learn your gear, network your butt off, and if you're doing, this is where it goes differently. If you're looking to have a really good mobile event company, network with other DJs that you can bring in, so you can, instead of being a one-op, you can be a multi-op, you could all work to help one another and drive revenue into each other's pockets. You want to network with wedding event planners, with every major Fortune 500 company has a corporate event planner on their staff, reach out to them. There's plenty of business out there. If you want to, get to the label creative side and do remixes for someone, again, you got to start off with, knowing your gear, practicing your skill, but you want to network with the club promo guy. A&R people are responsible for picking who does the remixes and doling out, the remix money. And they're hard to get to. But a very easy, accessible door is that club promotion guy, that dance promotion guy, at a label. And so, if you want to get to that world, then you want to, network that way too. It really comes down to, working your ass off, knowing your gear, staying on top of it, and networking, and marketing yourself. I mean, obviously, it's a different world now. Obviously, you want to have a presence on social media. But, people in the business who make decisions, who hire remixers and who hire people, who hire live event DJs, honestly, I'm gonna tell you, they really don't care how many followers you have and how many likes you have. I believe if you're in the live event business, you need to have a kick-ass website. And some examples of what you do, on social media. But if you want to get into producing and remixing and doing record work, then you just need to really be networking with people on the inside at the labels. And if you want to get a gig at a club, then I'd say network with club promoters and probably work the social media side more because they want to know you can bring an audience and they give you a night at a club.
And after working 30 years at DJ Times and interviewing every DJ you can imagine, from the biggest trance guy to the old school hip hop guy, the common denominator is hustle. And it's true. When Jam Master Jay started, he was doing block parties. Before the other two rapper guys were with him, he was the guy who put the hats on. He was the guy who put the Adidas on. He was the guy who got all the attention because Jay was the one throwing the parties. He was the one who had the hustle. So it always seems to be the DJ.
Yeah. It's funny because when Biz Markie passed away recently, I went back and I dug up my last interview with him from just a few years ago. And in that interview, there's a point where I'm talking about De La Soul, and Biz talks about how we used to hand out flyers for De La Soul when they were gigging in high school.
Talk about hustle. Yeah. Thank you, Howard, for doing this. We greatly appreciate all your stories. And thanks to all you guys for coming out and supporting DJ Expo.
Thanks everybody coming. Thank you, DJ Times, for the invite.